Welcome, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Rick Stone here from Stoney Acres Gardening. Glad to have everybody here today. Welcome to this is our 7 best crops for you to grow in fall and winter workshop. This is all part of our year-round gardening celebration. This is our week that we launch our year-round gardening master course. We do this once a year, every year, this week in July, and we opened it up to the public this morning. And so we are glad to have you guys here. We're going to do some more of these workshops. We've got 3 of them scheduled for this week total. And so I'm excited to have you here. We had about 500 people that were registered for this event. So as we kind of wait for people to collect here, let's chat a little bit. Tell me where you're from. And it looks like a lot of people are already doing that. Pennsylvania, and there's another Pennsylvania, Indiana from the UK. Barbara, welcome. Holly is from Atlanta. California, welcome. Tell me also in the comments what your favorite cool season vegetable is. And I'll tell you what mine is. It's carrots, okay? We love carrots, especially in the wintertime. I'm going to talk a lot more about that during the class, but we love carrots for growing in the wintertime. They are just amazing. So while we're waiting again, let me show off this very little tiny start. So let's see if you can see it. Can you get it to focus right there? You see it right there. That is the first of my fall crops coming up right now. So that's a little kale that we planted on Saturday, and it's already up. I'm pretty impressed that we're up that quickly. So Barbara loves Swiss chard. Holly loves spinach. Swiss chard for Denise. Good. We're going to talk about Swiss chard and spinach and carrots today. So good. Good. Peas for Noreen. Good. We love peas too. We were a little disappointed with our peas this year. The manufacturer or the seed seller mixed up varieties, and we planted like a whole ton of snow peas, which we didn't mean to do. So we were always there, a little disappointed. Holly is saying bok choy and chard. We're going to talk about both of those today. So good. All right. Well, I want to make sure that we honor everybody's time and we don't spend too much time just chit-chatting. So we're up to about 50 people here. Let's go ahead and get started. So this is part of our year-round gardening workshop series that we are going to be doing this week. So we've got 3 workshops scheduled for this week. The first one is this one, and we are going to be talking about the 7 best crops to plant for fall and winter. The next one will be on Wednesday, same time, 2 o'clock. And we're going to be talking about planting times, when you should actually be getting those in and how you calculate and figure out when to be planting your fall and winter crops. And then Friday at 2 p.m., we are going to be talking about protecting your crops and how to keep those crops under cover so that they are nice and protected during the cold time of the year. Start times on all of these events are 2 p.m. Mountain Time, which is 1 p.m. Pacific, 3 Central, 4 Eastern Time. There will be replays available. And if you have signed up for this particular workshop, then you're signed up for the other one. So you don't need to go sign up again. You'll get the emails with the links for the other 2 as well. So if you're watching this on YouTube and would like to get signed up for the live versions of these, then there is a link in the description of this video you can click on to get signed up for that. Okay, so today's workshop, here is what we are going to be covering. First off, we're going to talk about why AJ and I love winter gardening so much, why we garden all year long, and what it means to us and our family, and how we try to do our best to grow as much as we possibly can. Then we're going to take some time and talk about the 7 best crops for you to grow for fall and winter. We're going to go through and talk about each of those individually. We're going to talk about the hardiness of each crop and how they will kind of play into your overall year-round gardening kind of work as you're doing that. We are going to have a prize drawing. Today, we are going to give away a 3-month membership to the Gardening Academy. So that's a $75 value. Gardening Academy is our membership service. On that site, we have over 40 different courses and mini courses on different gardening topics. And so somebody will win a free 3-month membership to that. And if you happen to already, I've seen a couple of my Gardening Academy members here. If you happen to already be here and you're the winner, we'll get you 3 months for free too. So whoever wins will get that 3 months for free. We're going to talk a little bit about the year-round gardening course, and then we're going to do some Q&A. So a couple of maybe Q&A helpful hints for you. Hold your questions until I'm kind of done teaching. So I've got about 25 to 30 minutes worth of teaching for you. And while I'm teaching, I have a really hard time following the threads, the comments. You guys start commenting and it would get distracting. So I'm going to ignore you for about 25 to 30 minutes while I teach. So hold off on your questions. When we get to the question part, put 3 question marks in front of your question. That is going to help us to identify that it is a question. My wife AJ is kind of sitting in the background, and she's going to go through and highlight all of those so that I can get those questions answered. And then please limit your questions to today's topic, which basically is year-round gardening. I'll field any questions related to year-round gardening, fall and winter gardening, season extension, anything like that. But we're not going to talk about bug identifications and how to deal with, this and that. We're here today to talk about season extension and those crops that we can grow. And so that's kind of what we're going to focus the Q&A on. So I would appreciate that as well. Okay, so just kind of checking the feed here, and it looks like who's excited to learn about year-round gardening and the crops that we are going to be growing. I'm excited. I love this topic. This is by far my favorite topic. I love teaching people about it. I've been teaching about year-round gardening for about 13 years now. I had 2 years of really good success, and it just got me converted. And I started doing live workshops just locally, and I've been teaching a ton ever since. So Joe is saying yes, and Mariah, yes. And so yes, everybody's excited. So let me talk first a little bit about why we garden a year round. So I remember the conversation that my wife and I had. It would have been probably 15, 16 years ago right now. By then we were pretty experienced gardeners. We'd been gardening for 10 plus years. We were right smack in the middle of our family. All of our kids were, all 4 of them were still at home. And we probably 15 years ago, we'd have had, an early teenager and a 4-year-old. And so we were right smack in the middle of that whole family thing. And we were gardening in the summertime. And we talked about how much better our family ate during the summer. And, our kids, because they grew up around the garden, they were pretty good about eating their vegetables. And so we really ate well, very healthy meals and very healthy snacks all through the summertime, because we had this garden that was loaded with tomatoes and cucumbers and peppers and berries and apples and peaches and all of these delicious things that we were eating during the summertime. But then we kind of noticed that as winter came along, even with our canning, because we canned and we froze and we still do all of that. We dry herbs and things like that, but we were not eating as well in the wintertime as we did in the summertime, because we didn't have that fresh produce. So even though we were eating our canned peaches and eating our canned tomatoes, we still didn't eat as good because there just wasn't as much fresh produce around. And so we wanted to figure out how to make that happen. And I told the story in the last workshop that we did on Saturday, but we were down at an amusement park down in Southern California, and we noticed in the flower beds around, and this was January, by the way, in the flower beds around the attractions, they were growing kale and spinach and broccoli and lettuce and all these different herbs. And we were like, wow, how would that be to live somewhere where you could do that? Well, we didn't want to live in Southern California. There's 8.5 billion people living down there, and there's already too many here where we live. So we didn't want to move there. And so we came home from that trip, and I started doing some research, and I read some books, Elliot Coleman's book, Nikki Jabor's book, and we decided, this was in 2009, we decided that we wanted to give this a go, that we wanted to try year-round gardening and season extension and see what could actually happen in our garden if we gave this a go. And so let me kind of give you an idea of what is possible for you. So that was 2009, and we decided to plant our first fall and winter garden that late summer. So in in August of that year, we started planting things like carrots and spinach and lettuce and kale and Swiss chard and all the things we're going to talk about today. We planted that garden and we started harvesting from those plantings about mid-October. And we have had something fresh that we could harvest from our garden every day since. So every day since October of 2009, we have had something fresh that we could harvest from our garden. That's the possibility that you guys have. 15 years we've had of fresh food being harvested from our garden. Now, did we harvest every day? No, of course not. Especially in the wintertime, we didn't harvest every day. We would go out on a good sunny day and harvest a week's worth of carrots and spinach and lettuce and put all of that in the fridge. But anytime during the last 15 years, I had something that I could go out and harvest from my Zone 6B garden. So we live in just south of Salt Lake City, Utah, in a place that's pretty cold. We're not the coldest area in the world, but a cold area. And so there's a real possibility and real potential for you to be able to do this in your garden as well. So let's talk about what's possible in your garden zones, okay? If you live in zones 8 through 10, this is going to be pretty easy for you. You have warm winters, and I know you might not think that, but we think that, those of us that live in colder areas, you have relatively warm winters that it's going to be pretty easy to protect and preserve crops over the winter. So 8, 9, and 10, this should be a pretty easy thing for you to do, to grow a year-round garden. If you live in zones 5, 6, and 7, like we do, we live in zone 6, you are going to have the most benefit from year-round gardening because there are actually 30 different crops that those of us that live in zones 5, 6, and 7 can grow during the fall and winter. Just this huge variety of crops that you can grow. And so we just have so much potential in these garden zones. But those of you that live in the colder zones, so zones 3 and 4, it's going to be a little bit harder for you to get a year-round harvest, but it's definitely not impossible. The number of crops that you can grow will be a little bit lower. So where, I can grow about 30 different crops, you're probably going to be looking at about a dozen that you can grow. But even in zones 3 and 4, you should be able to have many of the hardy crops. In fact, quite a few of the ones we're going to talk about today, you should be able to grow year-round, 365 days a year, with the appropriate planting times and the appropriate protection. You should be able to do that. So how do we extend our garden and how do we extend our growing season? You have to do 3 different things. You have to choose the right crops. So if you live in zone 5, you are not going to be growing tomatoes during the wintertime. It's not going to happen. You're also not going to grow peppers. You're not going to grow potatoes. You're not going to grow sweet potatoes. There's certain crops that we have to choose in order to extend our growing season into the wintertime. Then you have to plant them at the right time. And it's earlier than you think. That's why we're doing these workshops in July, because many of you, in fact, the vast majority of you that live in zones 3 through 7 are going to be planting probably sometime in August is when you're going to be planting these crops. Some of you early in August, like me, some of you later in August, but most of you will probably be planting sometime in August. And that's why we talk about it now, okay? And then you need to protect your crops. So you need to have things like fabric row covers. You need to have hoop houses and cold frames that are going to protect your harvest over that winter growing season. And so that's the things that you need to do. So tell me in the comments while I take a break here, what excites you the most about year-round gardening? What is it that brought you here to this workshop today? What excites you the most about year-round gardening? Let me know in the comments. Is there a particular crop that you really want to grow? What is it that makes you excited about wanting to do this here in your garden? There's always a delay in the comments, and I always sit here feeling. Sue says she wants to get her hands in the dirt. Sunny says growing lettuce in December. Chris says fresh homegrown food in the cold months. Fresh greens, staying healthy all year long, lowering our grocery bill. Definitely going to happen there. Fresh, healthy food. Okay. Wayne's saying I'm retired and he wants something to work on during the winter. Linda's saying she would love to grow spinach in the winter. We're going to talk about spinach. Fresh food all year from Holly. Okay, great. This is what we are going to be talking about today. And I'm excited for you guys to get to know a little bit more about how to make this happen. Okay. So today, those three things that I talk about are the three things that we're going to be covering in the workshops this week. So today we are going to talk about choosing the right crops. And in particular, we're going to talk about the 7 best crops that you can grow for fall and winter harvest. So I call these the base crops. These are the crops that are really going to form the base and the foundation of your winter garden. So it's important that you get to know these crops, get to know how to grow them so that you can have them here. So let's talk about these 7 crops. And remember, there are 30 crops in total that you can grow, depending on where you live, that you can grow during the winter months. But these 7, most of us should be able to grow all 7 of these, okay? Lettuce, spinach, Swiss chard, Asian greens, including bok choy and tok soy, carrots, kale, and mosh. And mosh is also sometimes called corn salad. Those 7 crops make up the vast majority of what we can grow and what will kind of be the basis of our garden. Okay, so I consider those base crops. So let's go through, and what I'm going to do is take a few minutes and we're going to talk about each one of these crops and give you some ideas here of how you can integrate these into your garden rotation. And I wanted to start with lettuce first, because lettuce, of all of the crops that I've listed there, it's very important because all of us, most of us really like lettuce. Okay, we like to have lettuce salads. We like to have lettuce around all the time. And so it's a very important crop. But it's also, of all of the crops that I talked about, that I'm going to talk about today, it's the least hardy of all of those crops. So that means that it is going to last, depending on where you live, the least longest, if that makes sense. So for us in Zone 6B, if we have a really mild winter like we had last year, so we had a relatively mild temperature winter last year. So I honestly only remember our temperatures dropping below, down into the single digits, maybe 1 or 2 nights the entire year. It was a little bit odd. We normally will have a spell in January where we spend, most of the time hovering pretty close to 0. But last year was fairly mild. We just didn't see those cold temperatures. And we actually had lettuce that made it all the way until we used it all up. So it was almost late January before we had finished eating all of it. And it never got cold enough that I felt like I needed to harvest it and get it out of the way. Most years, though, lettuce for us usually only lasts until about mid-December, maybe Christmas, if we're really lucky, is about as long as lettuce will last for us. And here's the reason why. Lettuce doesn't like temperatures that are consistently in the low 20s at night. So once we hit those days where we're getting 20 degrees at night, and then it jumps back up to like 35, 40 degrees during the day. Well, inside the cold frame, that will be freezing in the cold frame, and then it will jump up to 50 or 60 degrees during the daytime in that cold frame. Spinach doesn't like that freeze, thaw, freeze, thaw, freeze, thaw. That actually kind of throws it off its game a little bit. And you'll start to find that the lettuce progressively, the plants start losing leaves to the outside. They get mushy and frozen until finally the plant gives up. So as that weather starts to approach, you want to go ahead and harvest whatever of your lettuce you have left. Unless, your temperatures like last year for us were fairly mild, that will be the case. Now, if you live in Zone 7 and definitely Zone 8, you really should be able to get lettuce to last most of the winter, especially if you choose some selected varieties. So there are winter varieties of lettuce that you can grow. The one that's the most popular is called Winter Density. And it is a kind of a bib lettuce, a butter crunch type lettuce that does really well in the wintertime. We've grown it several years and it does very nicely in the wintertime and holds up longer than most. The other varieties of lettuce that actually do really well are called summer crisp varieties. And I know that sounds funny that the summer crisp varieties would last long into the wintertime, but I have found from experience that they do. Summer crisp varieties are actually bred to stand up to the heat. They don't get tip burn, they don't bolt in the summertime. And those same characteristics, for some reason, mean that they do really well in the winter also. And so varieties like Nevada, Cherokee, Magenta, Fusion, and Muir, M-U-I-R, Muir, are all varieties that also do well. So there's 6 varieties for you: Winter Density, Nevada, Magenta, Cherokee, Fusion, and Muir. All of those will do really well as lettuces for you. So get those planted, and we'll talk about on Wednesday when you should actually be planting them. But lettuce should do really well. And for those of us that are in the really cold areas, like zones 3 and 4, you're not going to come close to getting lettuce to last all winter long. So instead, that's going to be kind of the early crop that you harvest. So you'll start harvesting that in the late fall and early winter, get that out of the way, and then you'll move on to some of your more hardy crops, like our next one on the list, which is spinach. So we had a couple of people that talked about how they wanted to be able to grow spinach and grow that in the wintertime. And you definitely can do that. Spinach is the workhorse of a winter garden. So it does so well. It's very, very hardy, stands up really well to cold temperatures. If you give it the right protection, it's going to just do super well. And it just is very hardy, and it tastes better in the wintertime too. Almost everything tastes better in the winter because the cold temperatures turn those sugars or those starches into sugars, and so it tastes better. So spinach is nice and sweet. It's tender. It's such a versatile crop to grow in the wintertime because you can use it as a salad crop, but then you can also use it as an add-in to soups and casseroles and things like that, or you can just use it as a cooked green. It's so versatile, and it's such a good plant to grow. We actually grow an entire cold frame, a 4 by 8 foot cold frame, some years even more than that, for our winter garden. You can, depending on where you live, you can actually get about 8 months worth of harvest out of a fall planting of spinach. So we'll plant, for us, planting date for spinach is about August 1st. We start harvesting about October 15th. And we'll be able to harvest that crop all the way until probably middle of May, depending on how warm the spring is. We may make it all the way to the middle of May. So we'll get about 7 to 8 months worth of harvest. And the colder you are, the longer that harvest will be to some extent. When we get down into zones 3, it's limited a little bit. But, if you live in a zone 5, you'll probably get even a little bit longer growing season out of spinach than I do because you have a longer cool season. Now, exact opposite happens for those of you that live in the warmer zones. So if you live in zones 8, 9, and 10, especially, your window for spinach is going to be much smaller because spinach is a cool season crop. And so it's only going to grow in those 3 or 4 months of the cooler part of the year for you. But spinach, great crop, very hardy, even for the colder zones. It just does so well and can be protected with a cold frame or a hoop house. And it's just going to be a workhorse for you. You're gonna love having spinach planted. Swiss chard is next on the list. Now, I hesitated putting Swiss chard on the list only because we don't love Swiss chard. And so I don't make a salad out of Swiss chard. I will put Swiss chard in a salad, but usually the base is going to be spinach or lettuce, and the Swiss chard will kind of be an add-in or a mix into it. We also will use Swiss chard in cooking. We'll put it in casseroles. We'll use it as a cooked green, but we don't use it as much as spinach. That might be different for you. It sounds like some of you really like Swiss chard, and so it can be an equally handy crop to have in your winter garden, just like spinach. It's as hardy as spinach, especially when the plants are smaller. You're going to plant them maybe just a little bit later than you would spinach so that those plants stay small, because we've all seen Swiss chard can get 2 or 3 feet tall, which means it's not going to fit in a cold frame. You'd have to have it in a hoop house in that situation. So planting it just a little bit later is going to keep it a little bit smaller. Those small leaves are going to be great in salads or as cooked greens. And then that plant is going to overwinter. You can kind of harvest from it all winter long. And then whatever's left in the spring is going to take off and kind of turn into the more traditional, taller Swiss chard plant, and that you'll be able to continue to harvest from. So Swiss chard, another great option, easily as hardy as spinach. And so you have, just a nice opportunity there to have a different type of green that has more stock to it, and just a good option for you as well there in your winter garden. Now, next on the list is our Asian greens. And I've got a bonus here because there's 2 Asian greens that we can grow, bok choy and tat soy, okay? So bok choy, for those of you that aren't familiar with Asian greens, bok choy, if you've ever gone to like a Chinese restaurant and you're eating a stir fry and you think that there's celery in it, that's probably not celery. It's probably the stalk from a bok choy leaf, okay? Bok choy is a really good leafy green. It's super healthy. It's a dark leafy green, which makes it very, very healthy for us. It's full of antioxidants and all kinds of things. But the nice thing about bok choy is it has much lower oxalate levels than spinach or kale and some of the other leafy greens. So if you've got a problem with like kidney stones or gout, that sometimes flares up when you have too much spinach or too much kale, bok choy might be a good solution for you because it has lower oxalate levels than any of the other leafy greens. It grows really well in the fall especially, but it's not as hardy as some of our other crops. So bok choy is more like lettuce in its hardiness. So you're going to, again, want to be targeting having that done and ready to harvest by about mid-December for most of us, because it doesn't stand up to the cold quite as well. But the nice thing about growing bok choy in the winter, in the fall and winter, is it doesn't bolt like it does in the spring. So in the spring for us, so that you know, for bok choy, the signal for it to bolt and go to seed is when light starts increasing. Okay, so when the sunlight and the day length starts increasing, it wants to bolt and go to seed. That's why it's so hard to grow in the spring. I had a terrible time getting it to grow in the spring. But in the fall, our light is falling, and so it doesn't get that signal. And so bok choy just does really beautifully in the fall. I love growing bok choy in the fall. And we've missed it the last couple of years because I just didn't get it planted. And this year it's on my list. Got to make sure it happens this year. I've already got the seeds. Now, another Asian green that you can grow is called tat soy. This might be one that you're a little bit less familiar with. Tat soy it tastes a lot like bok choy, has a nice stalk to it, but it grows differently. It grows more like a spinach plant. So instead of kind of forming this tighter head like bok choy does, it instead kind of spreads out like a spinach plant. It is very, very hardy. So it will be just as equally hardy as kale or spinach or any of those crops. And so those of you that live in zones 3 and 4 ought to be able to grow tat soy during the wintertime. It's just a super hardy and, again, very good for you, dark leafy green, and just as hardy as spinach. And so that's another one that we love. We had 4 plants last year of tat soy and harvested from it all year long. It even, it lasted all the way through the winter and went to seed in the spring. So tat soy, another great option. Both of those Asian greens are just good options for you. Next is my favorite, and you are going to love carrots in the wintertime. We absolutely love winter carrots. They get so sweet in December and January and February for us. My sister can't wait for that time of year. She comes over just so she can have carrots out of our garden because they just changes the carrot completely. That cold weather does. It changes those starches into sugars, and they become just this sweet candy bar tasting vegetable that is just amazing. You will love carrots in the wintertime. Now, a couple of things to keep in mind with carrots. First off, you can grow them directly out in the garden and not protect them, as long as you get them planted at the right time so that they're mature before the cold weather shows up. you can actually just leave them straight out in the garden. Throw some straw or maybe a fabric row cover over the top of them and just dig them out of the ground all winter long. The problem with that is in January and February, our ground is frozen hard. And so it's really hard to get those carrots out of the ground. So instead, we like to grow carrots in a cold frame or a hoop house because that keeps the ground from freezing really, really hard and makes it very easy to go out and harvest them. It's not a job. We can go out and dig up a week's worth of carrots and bring them in and in 5 minutes time. We're not having to pry them out of the frozen ground. And so that's really nice to do them in like a cold frame or a hoop house. The other thing that you need to keep in mind with carrots is we want to be looking at some of the shorter, smaller varieties. So we don't want the big, long, 8 to 12 inch carrots that get big and thick and long. We're not looking for those in the fall. We don't have the time to make those mature during the fall because the light's dropping off so much, so we lose too much time in the fall. So instead, we want to be looking for smaller varieties that only grow 4 to 6 inches, 4 to maybe 8 inches. My favorite varieties to grow, and we've tested all 3 of these, our favorite is Littlefinger, and that's the ones that I'm holding up in this picture. They're called Littlefingers. Scarlet Nantes are also a really good one, and Napoli are all good varieties that don't get too big. They're going to grow quick enough that they'll mature at the right time for you and should work out really well. So carrots, excellent. My favorite crop by far to grow in the wintertime. They're you got to give them a little bit of extra attention in the fall to get them to germinate, but wow, it pays off. The extra little work you have to do for a couple of weeks in August is going to pay off in December and January when you have those carrots. So you're going to love winter carrots, okay? Kale is the next one on the list. And had you told me 15 years ago that I was going to like kale as much as I like it now, I'd have laughed at you. But I really have come to like kale. We found a few varieties that we really enjoy. Vates is one that we really like a lot. That's what you're seeing here in this picture. And we also really love kale in the wintertime. So even garden grown kale in the summer just tastes like grocery store kale, right? It just tastes like kale, which some people like kale, some people just can't stand it. But when you get that cold weather and we start to get frost on the kale, and then we start to get freezing temperatures and we get those hard freezing nights, those starches in the plant turn into sugars and it just turns into this sweet, tasty green that we really enjoy. We really like kale, especially in the wintertime. I'm not one for eating kale raw. My wife loves kale and she'll eat it raw. I usually want it cooked, but in the wintertime when it's sweet like that, I'll even just eat it raw. We'll have kale salads and it's just super good. Now, the real benefit of kale in your garden in the wintertime is it's almost indestructible. Kale is, in my experience, probably the most hardy of all the crops that you can grow. It's just, especially the curly leaf kale, it is just indestructible. You can, here in our 6B garden, we've left it just out in the open without any protection, and it survived the winter before. Normally, we'll at least try and cover it with a hoop house or a fabric row cover, something like that. But it is just so hardy and will do so well. It's one of those crops that if you live in zones 3 and 4, you're definitely going to want to have kale on your list. It's going to be the best kale you've ever eaten. And that may be not a big thing to say. Some of you may have never liked kale, but it is going to be for sure a different vegetable for you altogether. It's just a totally different green in the wintertime. All 3 types of kale do well in the wintertime. So the curly leaf kale is our favorite, and I feel like it does the best. So Vates, winter boar, there's like a blue Siberian, I think it's called. Those varieties are going to do the best. But Lasiano kale or the dinosaur kale does really well, and so does the red Russian kale. All 3 of them will be very hardy and do really well all winter long. And so kale is definitely one that you need to get on your list, okay? And then last but not least on our list is mosh. So mosh is a kind of, some of you may not know what mosh is. You'll also, in North America, you will see it listed as corn salad sometimes. They're starting to pick up on the fact that most people call it mosh, and so I'm starting to see it listed as mosh. But for years, it would be corn salad is what they would call it. If you live in Europe, and I did see that we had some people here from Europe, you will sometimes see it listed in your seed catalogs as lamb's lettuce, okay? So mosh is a plant that is native to the French Mediterranean area. So the Mediterranean side of France, Spain, Italy, kind of all there along the Mediterranean. Mosh grows as a weed in the wintertime. So it just grows naturally out in the open in those warmer climates. So the nice thing is that people figured out that we could take mosh, bring it over here to North America, grow it, and then cover it with some protection, because obviously in the French, Mediterranean area, there's, they don't have really cold winters there. And so it grows really well unprotected. If we bring it here to North America and cover it with a cold frame or a hoop house, it's going to do just as well as it does in Europe. And the nice thing about mosh is that it will continue to grow even when our light dives down below 10 hours. So most of us in North America, maybe with the exception of some of you that live in the far south, will have about a 3-month time frame where our days drop below 10 hours of day length, total day length, between sunrise and sunset. When we hit that time frame, things just stop growing. Everything stops growing. There's not enough light. So the nice thing about mosh is it's one of the very few plants that will continue to grow even during that low light time frame. So you can plant it a little bit later in the year and it will continue to grow and give you a good harvest all through the winter. It's also very, very hardy. It's one of the hardiest winter crops that you can grow, equally hardy with kale and spinach. And so again, this is one of those crops that you can grow in zones 3 and 4. It will kind of replace lettuce for you. It has that same texture as lettuce. You don't harvest it the same way. So you can see these plants here in the picture. You actually just cut the whole plant off. So you don't try to take the leaves. The leaves are fairly small. You just cut the entire plant off. It's not going to grow back. It's not a cut and come again crop. You cut that whole plant off, rinse it off, break it up, and you can make a really nice salad out of it. And it makes its own really good salad. So it's good fresh. It's not a really good cooked green. It's a good fresh green like a lettuce is, and will replace lettuce during the wintertime. And so it makes for just a really nice substitute for lettuce during the winter. And again, super hardy, has a really nice, yummy, nutty flavor to it. That's the best way I can describe it. It doesn't taste like lettuce, has the texture of lettuce, but it has a more nutty flavor to it. And so it's really nice. It is a little bit harder to germinate. It wants to germinate in temperatures around 65 degrees Fahrenheit, which means it's a little bit better if you go ahead and wait a little bit longer than most of our other crops. So most of our other crops, we're targeting about 8 weeks before our first frost to get those planted. Mosh, you're going to wait and go maybe more like 4 weeks before your first frost, just to give it a little bit of an opportunity to get germinated in the cool time of year. But mosh is a great crop. We had a really good, one of our best years this last year with mosh. And it's just a fun crop to grow. It does well in hoop houses, does well in cold frames. Just a really good crop for you to have in your mix of things to grow in your garden. So that is your 7 base crops that you can grow during the winter months. Kind of, like I say, there's a lot more that we can grow, but those are the ones that are really going to pay off well for you. So which of these crops are you going to plant this fall? Let me know in the comments which of these crops you guys are going to try and plant this fall. And I'm going to take a quick break. And we're going to give away our prize. So we've got a good crowd here. I've seen as high as 80 people. So tell me which of these you are most excited. Kathy's saying she loves me some corn salad. Awesome. Patsy is saying, can you start all of these from seed? yes, you can start them from seed, or you can start them indoors, either one. So Chris is saying mosh, Sunny's saying chard and bok choy. Definitely lettuce and spinach from Madeline, carrots and spinach, carrots, kale, lettuce, all of them from Ann Moy. So carrots from Amy, and Paul is saying, oh, I've already lost Paul's. Where did it go? You guys are commenting like crazy. So, okay, I'm good. I'm glad that you guys are excited to get these guys going, because they are going to do really well for you. Before we just maybe a little bit of business before we get to the prize drawing, this is part one of a series of workshops that I'm going to be doing over the next few days. So number 2 will be when to plant, and we're going to talk about target times for when you're actually going to get things planted for fall and winter. That will be on Wednesday the 10th at 2 p.m. And then on Friday the 12th at 2 p.m., we are going to be talking about protecting your crops. So if you have already registered for the this workshop, and you got the link for this workshop, you're already on the list for the other 2. You don't need to go register for those. I've already got you on the list. If you're watching this on the replay and you want to get signed up for those other 2, there will be a link in the description that you can click on to go get signed up, so that you're on the list and get the link for the lives for those other 2 as well. Okay. All right. Let's give away a prize. So AJ, your time to shine is here. We're going to go ahead and get going on our prize drawing. So today we are going to give away, I'm trying to vary the prizes this time a little bit. So today we're going to give away a 3-month subscription to the Gardening Academy. So this is about a $75 value. The Gardening Academy is our monthly membership service, which has we do new stuff every month, and the old library, you'll have access to that full old library, which is 40 plus different gardening courses that are available. So it's a really fun place to be, and some lucky winner is going to win a 3-month subscription. Now, if you're already a member, because I have seen a couple of my members here, if you're already a member and you happen to be the winner, we'll get you 3 free months. We'll refund your 3 months or something like that to make that happen. But comment Great Gardener, because the Gardening Academy is where we grow great gardeners. And so comment Great Gardener in the comment section, and that is how we'll get entered. So we're going to give AJ about, we're going to give her about 5 or so minutes here to let everybody get their comments in, and then we will go ahead and do that. So hang on just a second here. I'm going to put this up so that while I'm talking, you guys have got access to that. Again, comment Great Gardener, and that is going to get you your entry. Okay, sorry. I had to do a little business on the side there to make sure I was getting everything ready. Okay, so who wants to harvest fresh food 365 days a year? Is that important to you and to your family? I talked about earlier about our trip down to Southern California and how we learned how to do this, and how important it has become for our family to have that fresh food all year long. We always have something that we can be harvesting from our garden. Dawn is saying, I do. Ann is saying, yes. Joe is saying, me. Applause from Caitlin. Okay. So I want to teach you guys how to do this. I want to teach you how to make it happen. And this is by far my favorite topic, year-round gardening. I just love teaching people about this. I started teaching this 13 years ago now, and I just love it because it means so much to us. What would it mean to your diet if you always had that fresh garden produce? That's why it is so important to have it. So I'm just super excited to announce today that we just opened up our year-round gardening master course for this year. We only open it up in July and August. And the reason why is because we want to get you guys prepped, because most of you are going to be planting your fall and winter gardens sometime during the month of August. Could be the first part of August like me, possibly even in July if you're in some of the colder areas. But most of you sometime during August is when you're going to be actually planting your year-round garden. And so we do it this time of year, so that you guys can have that knowledge and be ready. So super excited to announce this. We love this course. It is by far our most popular course. We've had thousands of people, literally, I'm not exaggerating, we've had thousands of people join the Year-Round Gardening Master Course and learn how to do this themselves. And last year, we were preparing for the course, and I was kind of going through and watching some of the lessons and everything, and I got looking at it. This was actually the second course that we ever did. Way back in 2015 and 2016 is when I filmed that course. And I got looking at it and I was like, wow, I'm a much better teacher now, and our equipment is so much better. It's probably time for us to update this course. This is supposed to be our most popular course, and so we decided that it was time for us to update this course. And so this year, for 2024, we have fully updated the year-round gardening course. So it's given a full update. Excuse me. The only module that we haven't updated is the fall gardening module, and we're going to do that one when I have my fall garden planted so that I can actually be out in the garden and showing you guys. But everything else, spring gardening, all the winter stuff, has been fully updated. So of the 80 lessons, all but 7 of them have been updated. So this is a fully updated course. You guys are getting all new lessons. We've added some content. We had a beta group that ran through 2 or 3 weeks ago. They had some really good suggestions for us, and so we made a few changes. And it's just a great course that you guys are going to love. About 6 hours worth of total course time. I know that sounds like a lot, but is what we do is for the first 4 weeks after you buy the course, I kind of run you through about an hour, hour and a half at a time, and we kind of work through the course together as a group. Now, the access that you get for this course is yours. It's this is a forever course, and so you'll be able to watch it as many times as you want. You can watch it at whatever pace you want, but we kind of design it so that for the first 4 weeks, you can actually work through as a group. In this course, we talk about what crops to grow. So we go through in much greater detail all of those base crops. We're going to talk about all of the other crops, the 30 different crops that you can grow. We're also going to throw in fall crops because you've got like the brassica family that you can grow in the fall that doesn't really count for winter crops as well. So we're going to go through all of those different crops. We're going to talk about all the different protective structures. So we'll talk about fabric row covers. We're going to talk about hoop houses and cold frames. I'm going to teach you how to build those, and we go through and explain how to build those. We're also going to talk a little bit about greenhouses. So that if you've already got a greenhouse, then you can use that as well. So we're going to talk about those protective structures. We're going to talk about timing, when you should actually be planting and getting these crops in, both our fall crops and our winter crops, so that they're ready at the right time. We're going to talk about care and harvesting. And AJ said that I needed to point out here how important it is for you guys to recognize that taking care of a winter garden is actually way easier than a summertime garden, okay? Because there's so much less going on in the environment, okay? You're very seldom going to have bug problems. You're not going to have to water. If you do water, it might be once or twice a season is all. You'll have to do a little bit of maintenance in the fall and in the early spring by just opening and closing your cold frame or your hoop house on a hot day. But basically, you plant in late summer, and in the wintertime, all you do is harvest. It's all ready for you, and you just harvest. And so winter gardening is actually, in my opinion, the easiest time to garden because you've got all this fresh produce, and all you need to do is just go out and harvest it. Bring it in when you're ready to eat some. And so taking care of a winter garden is just amazing. And so much nicer. And Maura is saying, I'm sorry, I'm probably blowing that name. Moria is saying less pests. She loves that. And that is definitely the case. You don't have to worry about squash bugs. You don't have to worry about earwigs and roly-polies and all that kind of stuff. It's all much easier. We also have a module on fall gardening. So maybe some of you think, Rick, it's crazy. I don't care about being out in January harvesting from my garden. Fine. I'm also going to teach you how to extend your current growing season about 6 weeks into the fall. Okay, so we have a fall gardening module that's going to let you extend. Even if you don't want to do a winter garden, it's going to teach you how to grow a fall garden. And then we're going to take those same structures, those hoop houses and cold frames, and we're going to use them for our spring garden so that we can get our spring garden planted earlier. This year, I started planting my spring garden in late February here in Zone 6B. So we planted our first seeds directly in the ground in late February. And then I had some seedlings that went out about March 1st. Out into the garden. So you can get so much more done when you know how to do year-round gardening. It just extends that growing season so much. The other bonus that you have by joining now in the summertime is because we work through this as a group for the first 4 weeks, I'm going to do live Q&A sessions. Now, they won't be like this. So this is we're using webinar software and streaming software, and all the questions are kind of over here in the comment section for me. Instead, for the Q&As for this course, we actually do them on a Zoom call. So you can ask me your question. I'm going to probably ask you to jump on the call, and we're going to ask follow-up questions. I'm going to make sure that I get all the details that I need. I know where you live so that we can get those questions answered. So it's a different Q&A experience than something like this, or something that you see on YouTube or something like that. Totally different Q&A experience that I know you're going to love. Okay, so that course opened this morning. We already have 40 plus people that have joined us already this season. And so we're super excited to invite you guys to come and join us as well. The regular cost for this course is $129, and it's a one-time price. So it's not a membership or anything like that. You just pay one time, and then the course is yours to watch over and over again. You can participate every year. Anytime I make any updates or changes, you get those. So people that joined last year are getting all of the updates that we're doing this year, okay? And so it's kind of a living course. It's our most popular course. It's the one we take care of, and you guys are really going to enjoy this. So one-time price, $129. But since you're here today, we're going to give you a deal. So we're going to take $30 off of the price and sell it to you for $99. And we also have, to go along with that, a little bonus course. So that is our succession planting mini course. So if you sign up using the link in the pinned comments, so there's a link over in the pinned comments, or down below if you're watching the replay, there's a link down below. If you sign up using that link, you will get, for the $99, you'll get the full course with everything that I've listed here, the Q&A sessions and everything like that. And you'll get that succession planting mini course, which goes right along with what we're talking about with year-round gardening. It's going to teach you how to do rotation of crops so that you have this constant, continual flow of produce coming out of your garden, so that you're always eating fresh food from your garden. So all of this is designed to make sure that you guys are just loving your garden and eating as much healthy produce as you possibly can from your garden. So again, access today, $99. Use the link in the description down below, and you will also get that succession planting mini course for free as well. Okay, so I know you guys are going to love this course. This is my favorite course to teach. We have hundreds. When you go onto the sales page, you'll see all of those. There's a bunch of different people that have comments. Those are all real people. I didn't make them up. They're not AI generated. These are real people that participated in the course. In fact, I've seen some of the people here that have commented. And so this is a course that I know you guys are going to love. And so click on that link down below and get signed up for that. Okay. All right. Let's give away a prize. And then we'll answer some questions. So if you guys want to start with your questions, it looks like we already have about 14 questions in there. If you want to go ahead and start putting some more questions in, make sure that you put a little question mark, 3 question marks before you ask the question. That is going to help you to help us to identify those, and AJ can get them started for me so that I can actually answer those questions. And then remember to try and limit your questions to the topic at hand. I'm not going to cover squash bugs and things like that today. We're here to talk about fall and winter gardening. All right, so let's see if AJ has a winner for us. So here we go. The winner of our 3-month subscription to the Gardening Academy, which is our membership service, is Holly Watterson. So congratulations, Holly. What I need you to do is I need you to just shoot me an email. We'll verify your email against the email that we have listed in the enrollment here. And then you can, then I will just get you set up on our system. You can create an account, and then we will give you 3 months access to the Gardening Academy. So you'll have access to all 40 of the different gardening courses that are there. You'll be able to participate. We're doing a season extension challenge this month. You'll be able to participate in that as well. So congratulations to Holly for winning that today. And I think I saw Holly was still here earlier, so congratulations. Okay. All right, guys. Still a great crowd here. We've still got 30 people. So I'm going to turn Holly's name off now, and we are going to go ahead and answer a few questions. So again, let's keep the questions limited to kind of the topic at hand, cool season crops. I'm seeing some questions about cabbage and things like that. That's fine. That's right in there. So let's go ahead and do those. So I'm going to looks like AJ spent some time working on getting that winner out. And so I'm going to let her take a minute to get some of those questions highlighted. And I'm going to go ahead and get the ones that she already has highlighted, and we will tackle those together. So Angie is asking, are today's crops all compatible to be grown together? Yes, you shouldn't have any problems with those. I'll be honest with you, Angie, and I know some people will get grumpy with me about this, but most companion planting suggestions are just that, suggestions. There's not a lot of real science behind them. There are a few crops that obviously don't do well together. I've always had problems with like cucumbers and potatoes being close together. They don't do really well together. But most of the leafy greens and root crops really don't have anything that is problematic with them. And so you really shouldn't have any problems at all with those being planted together. And then a follow-up question from Angie, sorry. Does that include iceberg and romaine and butter lettuces? Okay, so yes, but no. Iceberg lettuces are going to be problematic during the wintertime, growing them in the fall, unless you live somewhere that has a really long fall. So Southern California people that live in the deep South, they're probably going to be okay getting iceberg lettuce to grow in the fall. But for most of us, it's going to get too cold because iceberg lettuce takes 90 to 100 days to grow normally. And then you throw on top of that the fact that we're in the fall and the light's declining. That's going to add another 15 days on the end of that. And so iceberg lettuce is going to have a hard time maturing in the fall, unless you live somewhere that has those long falls like Southern California or Arizona or, the deep South, Florida, places like that. But romaines and butter crunch lettuces should all do really well. In fact, all of the ones that I suggested to you before are some variant of a butter crunch. So Winter Density is a butter crunch. Nevada is a butter crunch. Cherokee and Magenta are a very loose-leafed butter crunch. Fusion is. So all of those are going to do fine. And then just traditional romaines and butterhead lettuces. So we grow butter crunch, the actual butter crunch lettuce. That's the variety in the fall and winter. And we also do Paris Island Cos, which is a romaine. And we do that in the winter as well. And they do really well. So you should, those should all be just fine. Okay. All right. Annie is asking, when do you start spinach? You're in zone 8. Okay. So spinach, you're usually targeting about 8 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks before your first frost date. For you in zone 8, where it's probably warmer, I'm going to probably say about 6 weeks before your first frost date, unless you're zone 8 and you're like Pacific Northwest zone 8. Then I would say 8 weeks before. But if you're like, the South zone 8, then I'm going to say probably about 6 weeks before your first frost. And we'll talk a lot more about that on Wednesday. All right, Denise is asking, are transplants better than seeds for spinach? No, unfortunately not. Spinach is not a really big transplanter. It doesn't love to be transplanted. And so I'm not saying it's impossible. okay, you can have a successful spinach crop. But if you have the space in your garden, because again, it's late summer when we're going to be planting these. And so if you have the space in your garden, I would rather you direct sow spinach and carrots and then do seedlings for everything else, because spinach and carrots are both, yeah, obviously carrots, we don't start carrots indoors, we direct seed sow those, but spinach is going to do better direct sown if you have the space. If you don't have the space, then go ahead and get them started indoors. There's just a transplant shock period when you actually transplant them out that you kind of have to overcome, if that makes sense. And then Anna's asking, can you grow beets in the fall and winter? Yes, beets is one of the other 30 crops. They do pretty well. Beets don't hold up as well as carrots. Carrots and parsnips are the best root crops for winter. Beets, you usually want to try and get those harvested before the really cold weather settles in. They're going to handle December weather, but they're not going to like January and February weather, okay? Here again, I'm talking about people that have, kind of the traditional cold winters. So beets are more of a fall and early winter crop, whereas carrots and parsnips and even turnips would be a fall and winter crop. But yes, beets are definitely, I'm actually going to plant beets. My garlic is coming out hopefully tonight. I just need to get to it. And I'm going to plant beets as soon as I take my garlic out. I'm planting beets for the fall, today, hopefully, maybe tomorrow. We'll see. So yeah, definitely beets are a good one. They're one of the other 30. Can we start all of these from seed? Yes. If you have space, all of them can be started by seed. The only one of the 7 that we talked about that's a little bit problematic is mosh, because it likes that cooler temperature to germinate. And so I usually will plant some mosh seeds directly out in the garden, but I also usually start some indoors. So I keep pointing over here, and that's because my indoor seed starter is just right here next to me. And I will usually do both, because it kind of depends on what your fall weather is like as to whether or not that mosh will germinate well, and it will germinate well inside. So, but all of the rest of them can be planted directly sown if that's what you want to do. Wayne is asking, will the kale I plant in the spring last through the winter, or does it need to be replanted? And have I tried a kale tree? I have not tried kale trees. I keep meaning to do that and just haven't ever gotten around to it. But spring planted kale, probably the biggest issue you're going to have is size. So something that you planted in the spring is going to be pretty big, and so you're going to have to probably protect it with a hoop house to keep it protected. But as long as it hasn't bolted and gone to seed, which it probably won't, and it's in pretty good shape, then sure, it should last through the winter. Our kale will usually get planted. In fact, I have kale plants right here that I planted about a month ago. So they're about 2 more weeks, maybe 3 weeks, and they'll be ready to go out. And so that kind of gives you an idea. I'm usually planting in July is when I'm planting my kale for winter. Mary is asking, how do we work out zones in the UK? Mary, I'm shooting from memory here on this, Mary. I looked this up a couple of years ago. The UK is mostly zones 6 and 7, okay, in US equivalent, if my memory is serving me correctly. And if it's not, I apologize. But you for the most part are going to be, you have long, cold, wet winters, but they're not like Canada cold winters. So you're going to kind of compare to like a zone 5, 6, or 7, depending on where you live in the UK. But ultimately, it doesn't matter what garden zone you are, because our planting dates are all going to be based on our frost dates, which you should know. And so if you're learning, if you decided to take the course or something like that, everything is driven by frost dates, not particularly by your garden zone. So planting times are all based on your frost dates. So that's, so if you can come back on Wednesday, we'll talk about cross states and it's going to apply to you, even though you live in the UK. It shouldn't make any difference. Okay. Michelle is asking, I have a greenhouse. I'll have a greenhouse by fall. Is a greenhouse okay instead of a cold box or a tunnel? Absolutely. So the only reason why I don't spend a lot of time talking about greenhouses is, number one, I don't have one. And so I don't have a lot of experience with it. And I try to avoid talking about things that I don't have experience with, because then I'm just giving you book knowledge and not practical experience. But the other reason why I don't normally talk about greenhouses is because they're usually quite a bit more expensive. And I'm all about keeping costs down. I don't want you to feel like you have to go out and spend thousands of dollars on a greenhouse or a high tunnel when you can pull it off with a hoop house and a cold frame. So a greenhouse is basically going to be equivalent to a cold frame in its protection, the amount of protection that it offers. So anytime you hear me say cold frame, you can just interchange greenhouse with that. And everything that we talk about is going to do well in a greenhouse over the winter as well. And it doesn't have to be heated, okay, for these crops. That's the other nice thing about all these crops, is they don't need a heated at all. Okay, Cheryl is asking, will I be talking on Friday if covering and protecting grow bags is feasible in zones 5B, 6A? Yeah, we can talk a little bit about that, Cheryl. So if you've got a minute to come and watch that video, I'll try and remember to throw that in. The basic answer is you're going to be able to extend your season really well in grow bags. So you ought to be able to keep growing for another 6 or 8 weeks after the traditional season is over. But it's without a greenhouse. Now, if you had a greenhouse, then the answer would be a little bit different. But with a hoop house or a cold frame is not going to fit over containers. A hoop house, your containers are just up out of the ground, and so they're going to freeze faster. There's more exposure to the elements, and so they're not going to do as well. So you would probably still be able to get spinach and kale and mosh to overwinter in a grow bag that's protected with a hoop house, but it's not going to be quite as successful. But you can definitely extend your growing season. So you should be able to see, an extra 6 weeks of growing or more. Even if you can't get all the way into January and February, you're going to be in December, which is amazing anyways. So, okay. We are an hour and 7 minutes in. We still have 70 people here. That's great, guys. Thank you for being here. Let's kind of call it, I've got 17 more questions here to answer. So let's call it quits on the questions. So I'm gonna stop with the questions. Oh, AJ just slipped one more in. So we've got 18. We're gonna stop there because otherwise we're gonna be here for 2 hours. So let's go ahead and we'll kind of just keep going on the questions that have been asked and kind of go from there. All right, so Caitlin, how often do we water during the colder months? Zone 5B, not at all. Okay, I didn't water at all last season. We had a fairly dry winter, and so maybe I might have had a little bit of benefit from watering once during the wintertime, but that's one of the nice things about winter gardening. You don't have to water, because as long as you have watered well in the fall, your ground should have enough moisture content, and kind of the ambient moisture in the air, on a warm day, your cold frame or your hoop house is going to be, there's going to be humidity in there that's going to kind of rain down, and you just don't usually need to water in colder climates. Now, in the warmer, if you live in the South, yes, you're probably going to have to water once a week or once every 2 weeks or something like that. But it doesn't sound like you live in the South, and probably you're not going to have to water at all, as long as you're well watered in the fall. So when those first rainstorms start or snowstorms start to come in November, and they're like really wet and slushy, I will usually just take my covers off of my cold frames and let it snow on them, wet, slushy snow, then cover them up and it'll all melt and it waters my garden. And that usually is all you need to do. I'm usually not watering past about November 15th. And for most of us, that's going to be the case. Okay. All right. Angie, do we harvest them when there's freeze warning? No, carrots, you don't need to. Carrots are super hardy. They stay all winter in my garden. So as long as you've got them in a hoop house or a cold frame where it's easy to get to them and get them out, they'll just stay. You don't have to harvest them. You can just leave them in the ground all winter long, which is very nice. Joe is asking, where do we get a list of all of the 30 fall and winter crops? Join the garden or join the Year-Round Gardening Master Course. We talk about them there and have lists for you to print. If that's something that's not feasible for you, you could get Elliot Coleman's book, which is called The 4-Season Harvest, and it's available in that book as well. But we talk about it in the Year-Round Gardening Master Course. Can I grow winter beets in Zone 5? Barbara, I think we pretty much covered that. Yes, but those are gonna be one of the first things you harvest. You probably want in Zone 5, you're probably gonna want to have those harvested by early to mid-December because they don't stand up, they don't hold up as well to the cold and the freezing. Because part of that is because beets usually they're not as deep in the ground. A lot of them are up on the surface, and so they don't hold up quite as well. But yes, absolutely, you can grow early winter beets in Zone 5 for sure. Can straw on a winter garden save and preserve for early spring garden? Absolutely. So you could do, if you wanted to plant your spinach like maybe 4 weeks before your first frost date, and then cover it with straw when the cold weather comes, then you could uncover that, and that would be a great spring harvest. And you could do that with kale and mosh and lettuce, maybe even, depending on how cold you are. But yeah, that's definitely a good solution and a good idea. Holly, who's a member of the Gardening Academy, says, do I have any luck with Lucilla Swiss chard? It's very crunchy and a less strong taste. Had no luck with spinach. Yes, in fact, that Lucillus, I guess I'm saying it right. That's actually the first variety of Swiss chard that we ever grew, and we grew it for years and years. We've kind of mixed in the rainbow chards and stuff now, just because we like to have that color solution as well. But yeah, the Lucillus is a white stemmed Swiss chard, and it will do really well in the wintertime. We had, I think I mentioned one year we planted a 4 by 4 foot bed of Swiss chard, not knowing how much we really didn't love Swiss chard. And that was all Lucillus and did really well. And we ended up feeding a lot of it to the chickens. But yeah. All right. Wayne is asking, will the kale I planted? Oh, we already answered that one. That one must have gotten on there twice. So sorry about that. Barb is asking, can't remember what date you told me to start winter carrots. First frost is October 21st. Back off 8 weeks. That would be August 21st. So that's about when you should be putting those in. Maybe a little bit sooner than that. You could go, as early as maybe August 7th and would still be in pretty good shape with that. Because I'm kind of assuming your October 21st is kind of like my October 10th. And so you've got a little bit of a range there, but yeah, right around there, somewhere in mid-August is when you're probably going to plant those. Diana, when should we direct sow cabbage in Zone 5B? So if you're going to direct sow cabbage, now is probably the time. You're going to want a solid 12 weeks before your first frost. And so now would be the time. I don't direct sow in our garden. No. This time of year, they would just be eaten alive with all the bugs that we're struggling with. So we grow our cabbage seedlings indoors, and we actually started our cabbage seedlings zone. And again, zone is not as important as frost date, but our first frost date is October 1st, and we started our cabbage this weekend. So that was, in fact, well, no, this is kale. The one that I showed you at the beginning that's just starting to come up. If you see right there, there's a little green, that's kale, but we planted cabbage as well. So now is the time for you to be getting that in, especially if you're going to direct sow it, and then you're going to need to cover it, keep the bugs off of it. Sylvia, does trimming carrot tops off of harvested carrots cause them to go limp? I'm wondering if I should leave them on longer. I've always struggled with that. The way we deal with carrots not going limp is, number one, we leave them in the ground as long as possible. So that's why we do this whole winter gardening thing, and we put a cold frame over them and leave them in the ground. When we do harvest them, we cut the tops off, and then we harvest enough for about a week. And we'll put them in, we've got just a little bucket. It's just like a 1 gallon bucket. And we just kind of put them in point down in that bucket, and then put some water in it. And that keeps them nice and hydrated and keeps them from wilting. You could do the same thing with sand if you wanted to, like wet sand, but that's kind of a long-term storage solution. For me, we just harvest those, cut those tops off, put them in a little bit of water. So, we harvest, because we eat a lot of carrots, we'll harvest, like this 1 gallon bucket once a week, and then just put them in there, and they stay crisp for a week or two in there. And every once in a while, we'll rinse the water out. But that's a good solution for that. Anne, when can you direct sow red cabbage in zone 8? Okay, so Anne, you've got more flexibility than we do. Again, you want about 12 weeks before your first frost date. And you may even be able to, in zone 8, you might be able to sneak it a little bit later than that, maybe 10 weeks before your first frost date. So you've got some time, but you want that cabbage to be maturing after your first frost date. And they usually take, 100 to 120 days. And so, yeah, about that time frame is when you're going to be direct sowing those. Carol is asking, will I be talking about protecting grow bags? Oh, we already talked about that a little bit. Linda, currently my garden is full of broccoli, zucchini, cucumbers, a bunch of flowers. Once harvested, can I start spinach and carrots in August? Yes. So that's perfect. Again, we're, and we'll talk more about this on Wednesday, but we want to be, targeting about 8 weeks before our first frost date, either direct sowing them in the garden or sowing them indoors and then transplanting them out later. But they need about 8 weeks before that first frost. So yes, if you've got the space, once you've got the space, but you just need to make sure that you get that timing right. Holly, who is our winner? How long do you grow kale? Mine stops growing about late December due to low light. Yeah, so everything is going to stop growing in, sometime in December, depending on where you live. Sometime in December, it's going to stop growing. Then it will start growing again in the spring. Kale, unfortunately, is a biannual plant, and so it gets its trigger. The cold weather is what triggers it to go to seed. And so relatively early in the spring, it's going to want to bolt and go to seed. But we will usually, so we plant our kale about mid-July and harvest all the way through the winter. And then it will, April-ish, it starts going to seed, and then we're done. So we'll get a good harvest. We don't usually start, we hold off on that. So we're probably November before we actually start harvesting it. We let it get as big as we can, so we've got plenty of leaves, and then we'll just kind of continue harvesting all through the winter with those. Robin, can carrots be started and transplanted? No. There will be a few people who will disagree with me on that, but I saw, because you see carrots at like nurseries, and the reason why they grow them is because people are dumb enough to buy them. So I watched a video that I think someday I'll try this experiment too. I watched a video this spring, and this gal bought carrot seedlings from a nursery. So it was this container of seedlings that were just kind of this clump, and she took them out and separated them out and then planted them. And then right next to them, she direct sowed. And the difference was night and day. The direct sown carrots were bigger, healthier, stronger carrots. The transplanted carrots looked awful. Anything with a long taproot like that struggles to be transplanted. And so most root crops don't do very well. Beets, some people say beets will do okay. My experience is that they don't, but that could be partially our climate. But yeah, carrots, normally you don't want to transplant. There are a few people that can get away with it, but it's usually kind of climate related. I've seen, I think Charles Dowding, who is in England, has done some carrot transplanting, but they have much different climate than we do here in most of North America. Anne is wondering if the course is for beginners that don't know much. I feel like that it is. It's a little bit of an advanced skill, but I teach it in a very basic way that is going to help you. It's going to help you to understand it. And so, yes, I think that you will, as a beginner, you'll enjoy it. And it's not going to be too far over your head. That course will be. Angie, how much of today's crops will work in containers? All of them will work in containers, just not as well. Like we talked about, they're not going to last as long because the containers are going to be more exposed to the elements. But all of them will do well in containers, especially kale, mosh, spinach will hold out for a long time in a container. So kale, mosh, and carrots would too. So yeah, you should be in pretty good shape, but they're just not going to last all the way through the winter. Okay. Will you be able to buy the year-round gardening master course on the 12th? Yes, and we will have the same deal on the 12th. So with the bonus course will be available all this week. It will be available. You can buy it all the way up until Monday the 15th. So if you need to hold off just a little bit because of payday, you can absolutely do that. Okay. And then last, Angie is saying your kale went fast. I transplanted last year. Is it safe to start seeds now? Again, Angie, that will kind of depend on where you live. But you want to target with kale. You can target anywhere from 8 weeks to as much as, you could go 12 weeks before. If you're going to start them indoors, you could go 12 weeks before your first frost date and not have a problem. So kale is, pretty solid plant, and you can, the sooner you get it planted, the bigger it's going to be. Okay. All right. Well, we are about an hour and 20 minutes in. Let me just look. I'm going to go down here and see if, okay. I think we got everybody's questions answered. So awesome. Hey, guys, we still had a good group here, 59 people. Thank you for being here and being a part of this workshop. Again, remember, we will have 2 more workshops, one on Wednesday at 2, one on Friday at 2. If you signed up for this one, you're already signed up for those, and you'll get the email with the link. So you don't need to worry about it. If you're watching this on the replay on YouTube and would like to sign up for those, then there will be a link in the description so that you can get the link for the live on that. Okay. All right. One last reminder, go and buy the year-round gardening master course. There's a link in the pinned comments or down below. We've got that $99 deal for you right now. It's $30 off, plus you get that free bonus course. And we would love to have you join us. You are going to love this course. By far my favorite course to teach, and you are just going to dig this course. It is so much fun, and everybody that has taken this course has just loved it. So please go get signed up at the link down below. Okay. All right, guys, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it. AJ and I are really glad that you're here and that you support us. This is how we pay our mortgage and how we make our living. And so we so appreciate your support and everything that you guys do for us here at Stoney Acres Gardening. All right, we will see you all on Wednesday, and until then, we'll talk to you later. Okay, happy gardening, guys. Thank you. Have a great day.